Imagine living in a world where a private mistake could become a public spectacle. In medieval society, adultery was not just a broken promise. It could mean fines, church penance, public shame, exile, or a lifetime of whispers at the market square. Tonight we step into candlelit courts, muddy village lanes, and cold church doorways to discover how medieval people punished betrayal. If you enjoy quiet, immersive history like this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the low arch of a medieval town gate, where cold stone sweats in the evening damp and torchlight crawls along the walls like tired amber. Your boots are packed with mud, your cloak smells faintly of wet wool and hearth smoke, and somewhere beyond the ditch a horse exhales into the winter air as if even the animals have complaints. Straw clings to your hem from the cart where you rode half the day, and the rafters of the gatehouse above you are black with old soot. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience, assuming anyone survived long enough to make brochures. The bell of a distant monastery marks the hour, slow and hollow, and you feel at once how thin your comfort is in this world. You probably would not last a week out here, not because you lack courage, but because courage does very little against damp socks, bad teeth, and a justice system that considers public embarrassment a useful civic tool. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the guard squints at you through the rain, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what the local time is where your own night has found you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You draw your cloak tighter and step beneath the gate, ducking, though you do not need to, because everyone ducks under old stone when it looks as if it has been waiting 600 years for an excuse to fall. The portcullis hangs above in its grooves like a row of iron teeth black with rain and age, and the gatekeeper holds a lantern near your face long enough to decide that you're not a thief, a spy, or someone likely to bring plague, which in this town counts as a warm welcome. Behind him, a boy with a wool cap too large for his head leads a mule toward the stable yard, its panniers full of turnips and damp sacks of barley. Somewhere inside the wall, geese complain. Somewhere else a woman laughs once sharply, then falls quiet. The town opens slowly before you, not as a grand place from a painted book, but as a close and breathing thing. Timber houses lean over the lane with their upper stories nearly touching, as if the neighbours have spent generations trying to hear each other better. Rainwater drips from thatch and shingles into the ruts. Rushlights burn behind horn-paned windows. The smell is a layered comfort and warning wood smoke, wet clay horse dung, boiling onions, stale ale, river mist tallow, and the sour breath of too many bodies living inside too little wall. A dog appears from beneath a cart, shakes itself with great ceremony, and begins to follow you as though you've been chosen by a very small and muddy court official. You pass a roadside shrine set into the wall near the gate, no more than a niche, with a painted saint whose face has faded beneath years of smoke and rain. Someone has left a bent pin, a crust of bread, and a scrap of blue thread tied around a splinter of wood. Some swear that blue thread, if knotted while saying the right prayer, can turn away slander, jealousy, or a wandering spouse, though no one can quite agree whether the thread must be wool linen or stolen from the hem of the person causing the trouble. Such details matter deeply to people who have very few other tools. In this world, a charm, a candle, and a whispered bargain with a saint may feel as practical as a locked door. The guard gestures you onward with 2 fingers. Keep to the main way, he mutters, though his eyes have already moved past you toward a pair of women entering behind a cart. They wear rough cloaks pinned at the shoulder and carry wicker baskets under cloth. One leans close to the other, speaking through the rain, and the word that slips between them is soft but bright enough to catch adultery. You do not stop. Stopping too quickly is how a stranger reveals curiosity, and curiosity in a walled town is nearly as suspicious as theft. Still, the word walks beside you now. It settles with the rain on your hood. It moves ahead of you down the lane faster than your boots. Near the well, two apprentices pretend to wrestle with a barrel while listening to a fishwife talk under her breath. Near the baker's shutter, a man in a patched russet hood crosses himself, though whether from piety habit or the hope that scandal will not splash onto his own doorstep is hard to tell. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on where such trouble begins. Some say it begins in a glance held too long across a feast table. Some say it begins at the washing place when winter is cold and kindness feels warmer than it ought. Some say it begins only when neighbours notice, for until then sin remains mist, and after that it becomes weather. You follow the main street toward the market square where the day is closing itself like a purse. Stalls stand half covered in canvas. A poulterer gathers his unsold birds into a crate. A woman scrapes mud from her pattens with a little stick. The last loaves sit on a board beneath a cloth hardening in the damp, and a child-sized shadow darts between barrels before a mother's hand catches it by the collar and pulls it indoors. The bell sounds again from the abbey beyond the fields, and the town seems to breathe with it. One deep inward hush, then the return of small noises. By the conduit, a cluster of townsfolk has formed with a particular stillness of people pretending not to gather. There is always a centre to such a group, even when no one admits it. Tonight the centre is a woman in a dark green cloak, her hood drawn low, standing beside an older man whose beard is forked and wet. A younger man waits several paces away near a cartwheel, staring at the ground, as if the mud has begun offering legal advice. No one touches anyone. That is what you notice first. The space between bodies is as carefully kept as the distance around a candle flame. A Reeves man in a leather belt speaks quietly, one thumb tucked behind the iron keys hanging at his side. His keys knock together whenever he shifts a small cold sound beneath the rain. You catch only fragments. Brought before, sworn neighbours, at first light, steward will hear. And then that word again, not spoken loudly because it does not need to be adultery. It lands among the listeners with the weight of a dropped stone. In this town, as in many towns of the age, a marriage is not only a private promise whispered over joined hands. It is a knot tied through families, fields, rents, dowries, inheritances, sleeping places, work, bread, and the names of children not yet born. A broken vow is never merely two hearts behaving foolishly, though hearts are certainly foolish enough without assistance. It is a crack in the household wall, and everyone fears the draught that may come through. The manor wants order. The church wants confession. Neighbours want certainty punishment, and preferably enough detail to discuss for the next 6 winters. Humanity, you find, has made impressive advances in gossip long before it has mastered clean drains. You keep walking because the rain is finding its way through your collar. The dog follows. The market square narrows into a lane of beaten earth and stones, where an alehouse sign creaks in the wind. The painted board shows a red cock with one suspiciously human eye, and beneath it light spills from a low doorway. You pause under the eaves. Inside you hear the thick murmur of voices, the scrape of benches, the clatter of a wooden bowl, the cough of someone who has spent too many winters beside smoky fires. Warmth presses against the door in waves, carrying the smell of ale pottage, damp wool, and old rushes scattered across the floor to sweeten what cannot truly be sweetened. Before you enter, you glance back down the lane. The woman in the green cloak has turned toward the church tower barely visible above the roofs, its stones dark against a bruised evening sky. The young man by the cartwheel does not look at her. The older man beside her grips his staff with both hands. No one can quite agree whether justice begins in a court of confession or the moment a whole town decides to watch. But here under the rain-dark walls you sense that by dawn the private ache of one household will be carried into public light, weighed by men with keys and ledgers murmured over by women at wells, and measured against vows spoken before God, neighbours and saints whose painted eyes have seen too much. You step into the alehouse at last, lowering your hood as smoke curls along the rafters. A place opens near the hearth, narrow but warm enough, and the dog settles under the bench as though this has been the plan all along. You wrap your hands around a wooden cup, feel the heat of bodies and fire return slowly to your fingers, and listen as the town, one whisper at a time, begins to tell you what it thinks has happened. The ale is thin, a little sour and warm enough to persuade your hands that life in this century is not entirely a clerical error. You sit on a bench polished by generations of cloaks, damp elbows and tired backs, while the hearth gives off more smoke than generosity, and the rushes on the floor release a faint, sweet, rotten smell whenever boots grind them underfoot. Someone has strewn fresh herbs among the old stalks, perhaps lavender, perhaps mint, perhaps merely a hopeful plant with a good reputation. In medieval rooms, scent is often half remedy and half wishful thinking. The dog at your feet sighs like a minor lord disappointed in his tenants. Around you the hall of the alehouse gathers the town into a single low murmur. A cooper with arms like barrel staves hunches over his cup. Two women in woolen hoods share a trencher of onions and coarse bread, speaking without ever seeming to move their lips. Near the wall a pedlar dries his gloves by the fire with the concentration of a monk illuminating a saint's eyebrow. The rafters above are soot black and hung with bunches of drying herbs, a string of garlic, and something that may once have been a rabbit but now looks more like an argument with gravity. You are not the only stranger here, but you are new enough to be noticed and ordinary enough to be tolerated, which is the most comfortable social rank in any busy room. A serving woman with red wrists from lye and cold slaps down a bowl of pottage before you. It is thick with peas and barley and flavoured by something smoked. Perhaps fish, perhaps pork, perhaps a memory of pork. She adds a wedge of coarse bread and gives you the sort of glance that weighs purse manners and likely trouble in a single breath. Then she's gone again, skirting a stool with the agility of someone who's been dodging men-dogs and spilled ale since childhood. The talk around you circles the case now hanging over the town. It does not rush toward it. No one ever rushes toward scandal in a direct line. It is approached the way one approaches a suspicious pond in winter casually, while looking to see who else is already standing there. A tanner near the hearth says too loudly that the world has been tilting toward wickedness since last Candlemas. Another man replies that the world tilted long before Candlemas and shows no sign of righting itself now. This counts as theology after dark. You dip bread into the pottage and listen. The woman in the green cloak has a name, it seems, though everyone delays using it as if names make matters heavier. The young man by the cartwheel also has a name, though his is spoken with more relish. A wife suspected of adultery draws pity, suspicion, anger and curiosity all at once. A man suspected of sharing the guilt draws something else. Mockery, caution, envy in the worst hearts, and in the better ones a stiff discomfort. No one says this plainly, but you feel the shape of it in how the room leans. At the far end of the table an old widow warms her palms around a cup and announces that in her girlhood a woman in another village had to stand barefoot in church for 3 Sundays with a candle taller than her arm. White shift only, she adds, lifting a finger. No cloak, no hood, no pride left in her. Some swear that in certain parishes the penitent even carried a rod, or wore a sheet, or went around the churchyard while the priest recited penitential psalms, though no one can quite agree whether such customs belong to law or simply to memory's love of embroidery. The widow speaks with cheerful certainty anyway, because certainty is one of the few luxuries age sometimes allows. A miller's wife counters that manor courts prefer money where they can get it. Fine them, bind them, make them swear, she says. Lords like silver better than tears. Her husband nods without looking up. He breaks bread into exact pieces, perhaps because mills teach a man to respect measures. She goes on to explain for the benefit of no one and everyone that married life is not merely a matter of hearts or of sheets, but of rents paid on time, children recognised, and fields passed down without quarrel. The room murmurs agreement. In this world affection may begin a marriage, but bread must carry it the rest of the way. You notice how often people speak of households rather than lovers. A marriage here is made of wool blankets shared in winter, of ale brewed before Michaelmas, of geese fed through frost of a wife, keeping the keys to a chest of a husband, owing plough-work of kin joining in harvest of who sleeps near the hearth, and who rises first to stir the embers. Break trust, and it is not only a sigh or a tear that follows. It is an unease in the loom-room, a silence over supper, a question over whose child that is, whose dowry that was, whose strip of land should pass to whom. Even now it is hard to tell whether the fear of adultery lies more in wounded love or in wounded order. The town treats both injuries as one. The serving woman returns with a pitcher and tops off cups without asking. She pauses when the gossip sharpens. If she did, it says the cooper shall answer before God. Before the steward, first the serving woman replies dry as old parchment. A few laugh into their cups. You suspect she has seen more real justice from spilled stew than from dignified men in belts. Near the door, a peddler produces a little lead badge from his purse to show a companion a pilgrim token stamped with the figure of a saint. He swears that touching it to a wedding ring can steady a wandering marriage, though the companion observes that if saints solved all domestic miseries, inns would be emptier and priests far less busy. The peddler sniffs and says some charms are powerful only if the guilty person does not know they are being used. This seems a convenient rule for a failed miracle. Still, such beliefs are common enough. Women knot threads above bedposts. Men tuck herbs into boots. Mothers burn rosemary to drive out envy. A jealous glance in some corners is thought nearly as dangerous as a sinful embrace. The fire settles lower. A boy comes around trimming the wicks of 2 beeswax candles set near the shelf where cups are kept, and for a moment the room glows softer. Beeswax is dearer than tallow, and smells cleaner when it burns, but only the church or better sort can afford much of it. Here in the alehouse even one small beeswax light seems grand. It throws a golden skin over rough boards, cracked bowls, patched sleeves, and faces lined by wind and work. In that warm blur everyone looks a little more forgivable than their speech suggests. Then the door opens again, and with the rain comes the Reeves' man iron keys knocking softly at his side. Conversation does not stop all at once. It thins. That is more effective. He stamps his boots, nods to the innkeeper, and orders ale. No official announcement follows, which somehow makes his presence more important. He drinks half the cup, wipes his beard, and only then remarks that sworn neighbours will be called at first light in the manor hall. The steward will hear the matter. Husband, wife, and the other party must attend. The priest has been informed. There will be questions of penance as well as of custom. This lands over the room like a wool blanket laid across sleeping children, soft, heavy, unavoidable. The old widow crosses herself. The cooper grunts, satisfied that the world still has its machinery. The miller's wife presses her lips together in a look that is almost pity. No one asks names now. They do not need to. The thing has passed from rumour into process, and process gives a scandal bones. You finish the last of your pottage and feel the day's damp settling deep in your shoulders. A bench near the wall has been cleared for travellers. The innkeeper, who has the broad, patient face of a man resigned to human foolishness, tosses you a folded wool blanket and points with his chin. You thank him, and he replies that if you keep your boots near the fire, one of them may survive until morning. It is the kindest blessing anyone has offered you all day. As the room quiets, you lie back with your cloak under your head. The dog curls against the bench leg. Outside, rain taps at the shutters. Far off the monastery bell marks another hour, and you remember the woman in the green cloak standing in the square, with all that empty space around her, as if shame had already begun building walls. Tomorrow, under colder light, the town will watch private vows be weighed like sacks of grain. Tonight it only listens, chews, warms itself and waits. You do not fall asleep at once, because the alehouse has the restless breathing of a place pretending to settle, while secretly hoping for one more scrap of news. The fire lowers itself into red eyes beneath the ash, and every now and then a stick collapses with a soft inward sigh. Men and women shift on benches. Someone coughs into a sleeve. Someone mutters a prayer without finishing it. The dog at your feet dreams paws twitching as if pursuing a rabbit through a better century. The room smells of damp wool, stale Russia's wood smoke, and the last onion-sweet ghost of supper. Your blanket scratches your chin. Your boots stand near the hearth, steaming gently, and you suspect they're not drying so much as becoming a warmer sort of wet. Such is medieval comfort, a series of small disappointments arranged near a fire. Above you the rafters hold darkness in thick bands, and the bunches of herbs tied there sway whenever the door lets in a blade of rain-cooled wind. The Reeves man sits apart now, his cup between both hands, his keys resting silent against his thigh. Because he says nothing, everyone speaks around him with extra care. Rumour continues, but it dresses itself as memory. No one claims to know too much. No one wishes to appear eager. Yet each person seems to have inherited, witnessed or heard from an aunt's husband's cousin some punishment that fits the matter perfectly. The old widow begins again, because age like a monastery bell ring when it must. She says that in a town beyond the river, a man once paid a fine so heavy he had to sell 2 pigs and a brass pot. A brass pot she emphasizes as if the moral centre of the story sits there shining in the ashes. For breaking another man's peace, she says, and for making the whole parish restless. Some swear such fines are called by different names in different places, and no one can quite agree whether they punish lust, deceit, insult, or the trouble caused afterward. Perhaps you think the court does not much care which sin opened the door once the draught is blowing through everyone's house. The cooper snorts and says money is too soft a medicine for shame. His own grandfather, he claims, saw a pair led through the market with their heads uncovered, while boys rattled pans behind them. A woman near the wall says boys will rattle pans for anything, including weddings, funerals, wandering goats, and clouds shaped like bishops. The cooper concedes this with a shrug. It is hard to build justice upon the judgment of boys with cookware, though many villages have tried. Talk turns to public penance. The words lower the room's warmth. You imagine the church door in morning light, its iron hinges dark with damp, the stone threshold worn by generations of knees and boots. To stand there barefoot holding a candle, watched by those who bought your eggs, borrowed your sieve, sat beside you at mass, and knew exactly how patched your winter cloak had become, that might cut more deeply than a fine. In a world where a good name is a roof, public shame is weather. It seeps in everywhere. A wool carder with a face narrow as a knife says that shame keeps order better than the stocks, because the stocks end when the legs are freed, but shame goes home with you and sits by the hearth. No one laughs at that. The serving woman passing with a bucket of cloudy water murmurs that shame also eats supper and expects clean linen. Her voice is quiet enough that only those nearby hear, but you do, and you store it away. In this room, women often speak from the edges and strike nearer the centre than men notice. A pilgrim who has been dozing near the chimney opens one eye. His cloak is covered with little signs of travel, a scallop shell, a bent pewter badge, a strip of leather knotted around the wrist. He says there are places where adulterers must walk to a shrine, fasting on bread and water, and leave a candle before a saint known for taming unruly households. Which saint no one agrees. He offers 3 names, then admits he may be confusing one with a saint who cures swollen knees. Medieval holiness, like medieval roads, has many crossings and very poor signage. The miller's wife says her grandmother tied rue and southernwood into a small packet and hung it beneath the bed to cool wandering desires. Another woman says rue is better for keeping fleas away. The miller's wife replies that both purposes may be needed in marriage. A few tired smiles move through the room. Some swear that a sprig of rosemary placed under a pillow reveals a false lover in dreams, though others insist it only makes the pillow smell like stew. Even now it is hard to tell whether such customs are faith fear or simply the household art of doing something when no one knows what else to do. The rain thickens outside. It drums softly on the shutters and turns the lane beyond the door into black paste. You pull the blanket closer and watch shadows tremble along the walls. The half-burned beeswax candle from earlier has shortened into a golden stump, its flame leaning whenever someone breathes too near. Its light touches the Reeves man's keys, the widow's folded hands, the pilgrim's shell, the innkeeper's tired eyes. All of them belong to the same world, yet each seems to carry a different law inside the breast. A young carter, perhaps emboldened by ale, asks whether the punishment would differ if the husband forgives. The question makes the room shift. Forgiveness here is not simple. A husband may forgive in his heart if his heart is generous or exhausted, but kin may not forgive. The parish may not forgive. A lord may still want his fine. A priest may still demand penance. The matter may have grown legs and walked beyond the marriage bed into the fields, rents and pews of everyone around. One old man says peace must be seen, else it is not peace. That sentence stays with you longer than you expect. The Reeves man finally speaks not loudly. At dawn, sworn men will say what they know. The room stills. He lifts his cup, drinks, then adds, or what they believe they know. That is all, but it is enough to make the fire sound louder. In medieval courts, truth often arrives wearing the cloak of reputation. Who was seen near whose door after Compline? Who gave whom a ribbon? Who stood too close by the wash-place? Who laughed when no joke had been told? A life may be pieced together from such scraps, and scraps like rushes on a dirty floor can hide almost anything beneath them. One by one, people surrender to sleep. The widow nods in her corner. The cooper folds his arms and lowers his head. The serving woman banks the fire, covering the embers with ash so they may live until morning. This too is a household wisdom: keep a little heat hidden, and the next day begins less cruelly. You listen to the last whispers fade into breathing rain, and the faint creak of the hanging sign outside. Before your eyes close, you think again of punishment and how strange it is in this world. It is coin paid under protest. It is bare feet on cold stone. It is a candle held until wax bites the fingers. It is a song shouted beneath a window. It is a name spoken differently at the well. It is law, faith, gossip, fear, and wounded pride tangled together like wet rope. No one in the alehouse fully agrees what is fair. Perhaps no one ever has. Yet morning will come all the same, pale and damp over the town walls, and with it the slow machinery of judgment. Morning comes without kindness, pale as watered milk behind the shutter cracks, and you wake to the smell of ash, damp wool, and a room full of people who have slept badly in several different positions. Your boots, despite spending the night near the hearth, have chosen to remain wet in spirit. The dog lifts its head before you do, ears pricking toward the street, where a bell from the monastery marks the hour with slow, cold patience. Outside, the town is stirring into judgment. You rise with the others, shaking straw and old rushes from your cloak. The innkeeper opens the door and dawn enters like a tax collector, grey unavoidable and not especially welcome. The lane beyond the alehouse is slick with mud reflecting the weak sky in broken strips. Women carry wooden buckets toward the well. A boy drags a bundle of kindling almost as large as himself. Smoke begins to climb from roof holes and crooked chimneys, blue and thin in the morning air. Somewhere a cock crows with the cracked confidence of a creature who has never been asked to answer before a manor bench. You follow the small movement of people uphill toward the hall where the steward will sit. No one hurries, yet everyone seems drawn by the same invisible cord. The Reeves man walks ahead, iron keys knocking softly at his belt, and the sound reminds you of last night's half-burned candle, the old widow's folded hands, the pilgrim's uncertain saints. Behind you, the dog pads along, having apparently decided that public justice requires canine supervision. The manor hall stands near the inner wall of the town, timber-framed above a stone undercroft, its great oak door dark with rain. A carved lintel shows Leaves beasts, and one face with its tongue out, though no one can quite agree whether it is meant to frighten demons, mock sinners, or simply prove that the mason had a private sense of humour. Over the doorway hangs a horseshoe, fixed open and upward to hold luck, though a woman near you mutters that it is useless if someone nailed it after sunset. Medieval protection has many rules, and most of them arrive too late. Inside the hall is colder than the alehouse, but brighter. Rushes cover the stone floor in uneven patches, and fresh green herbs have been scattered near the high table, perhaps to sweeten the air before justice makes it sour again. Benches run along the walls. A fire burns in the central hearth, but the smoke wanders upward slowly as if reluctant to leave such interesting company. At the far end, beneath a faded hanging embroidered with a hunting scene, the Lord Steward takes his place behind a long table. He is not the Lord himself, only the Lord's voice in a fur-lined gown, which may be worse since voices often feel less mercy than bodies. Beside him sits a clerk with ink-stained fingers trimming his quill with a little knife. His parchment is weighted with a smooth stone. A small pot of ink waits near his hand, black and glossy as a winter pond. He glances at the gathering not with cruelty, but with the practised weariness of a man who has learned that human folly always arrives faster than parchment can be prepared. On the table lie a tally stick, a wax tablet, and a little heap of folded notes. These are the tools by which private grief becomes record. The accused woman enters with her husband and 2 kinsmen. She has lowered her green hood, and in the morning light you see a tired face, neither wicked nor innocent, in any simple painted way, only human and strained. Her hands are red from cold. Her husband stands beside her, jaw set so tightly it seems carved from the same oak as the door. The younger man from the cartwheel comes last, watched by everyone and looking at no one. He wears a brown cloak with a torn hem and mud up to both knees. If shame could be measured by posture, the clerk would have to ask for more parchment. The steward begins not with thunder, but with routine. This is almost more unsettling. Names are spoken, duties are named. The sworn neighbours are called forward men who hold land, pay rents, know boundaries, remember quarrels, and have spent many years noticing who crosses whose threshold after dark. They stand in a line, caps in hand, smelling of wet wool smoke and cow byre. One has a bit of straw stuck to his sleeve. Another keeps rubbing his thumb against a charm ring, perhaps for luck. perhaps to remind himself not to lie. Some swear that if a man gives false witness while touching iron, his hand will ache until Candlemas, though even now it is hard to tell whether aching hands come from sin, weather, or years of work. The steward asks what has been seen, not what has been dreamed. That is the first important distinction, though it proves slippery. A neighbour says the young man was seen leaving the lane behind the woman's house after the bell for Compline. Another says there was a ribbon given at harvest. A third admits he only heard of the ribbon from his wife's sister, which makes the clerk pause, sharpen his gaze, and dip his quill more slowly. The steward frowns. Rumour may lead a court to the door, but it does not always get invited to sit at the table. You stand near a post worn smooth by hands and shoulders, listening to the way truth is assembled from fragments. A glance near the well, a missing hour, a quarrel heard through a wall, a husband away with a cart of wool, a neighbour waking to latch a shutter and seeing a shadow where no shadow should be. No one says love, no one says loneliness, no one says hunger for tenderness in a winter house where words have gone cold. The court has little room for such soft things. It asks instead who has been wronged, what peace has been broken, what fine may be owed, what penance must follow. The husband speaks, and his voice is low enough that people lean in despite themselves. He says his household has been shamed. He says his kin ask what certainty remains. He says men laugh near the mill and that laughter is harder to endure than any debt. The steward nods as if this makes sense, because in this world, honour is not a private jewel kept in a box. It is a cloak worn in public, and once stained, everyone points. Then the woman speaks. Not much. She says some of what has been told is false. She says the ribbon was for mending, not courting. She says the young man came once with news of her brother. No one can quite agree afterward whether her voice trembled from guilt, fear, anger, or cold. The clerk writes only the words, not the trembling. That is the trouble with records. They catch the bones and lose the breath. The younger man is questioned next. He denies more than he admits more than is wise, and stares at the floor so fiercely that the rushes may feel accused. The steward listens. The Reeves man watches the door. The sworn neighbours shift. Outside, carts creak past geese call, and somewhere bread is being pulled from an oven. Life continues its ordinary labour even while one household stands open, before everyone like a chest with its lid forced back. At last the steward orders sureties to be named and further testimony to be gathered. No sentence yet, not here, not this breath. The matter will go forward with the priest's counsel and the court's custom both pressing close. A fine may come, an oath may be required, public penance may follow, for now the accused must remain within reach under watch of kin and neighbours, which is another way of saying that the town itself becomes a wall. People begin to loosen, disappointed and relieved in equal measure. The dog noses at your boot as if reminding you that even justice must eventually make room for breakfast. You step back into the grey morning where the mud waits patiently in the lane and the monastery bell fades over the roofs. Behind you the manor door remains open, swallowing one small rumour after another, and returning them changed heavier and written down. You remain outside the manor hall longer than you mean to, standing beneath the dripping eaves, while townsfolk spill into the lane and begin turning judgment back into talk. The morning has grown no warmer. Rain has thinned into a silver mist that gathers on eyebrows, cloak hems, and the noses of patient animals. A cart creaks past with sacks of oats under a patched cover. Somewhere nearby, a woman scolds a hen with the gravity of a bishop correcting heresy. The dog leans against your boot, damp and loyal in the vague way of creatures who have adopted you without permission. The accused woman and her husband do not go toward home. That is what draws your attention. They move instead toward the church, accompanied by the Reeves man, one kinsman, and the parish priest, who has appeared as if summoned by the smell of difficulty. His cloak is dark with rain, his tonsure shining faintly beneath the grey light, and his face holds the careful expression of a man who must tend souls, while also knowing exactly how often souls make paperwork. You follow at a respectful distance with others who pretend they are merely going the same way. The lane climbs past a row of houses where smoke seeps through thatch, and women shake out damp cloths from upper windows. A child peers from behind a doorpost until an unseen hand pulls him back. At a trough, an old man rinses a wooden bowl and murmurs that church penance is better than court punishment, because God may forgive what neighbours will not. No one answers him. Perhaps no one wants to admit how true it sounds. The church stands near the centre of the town, older than many of the houses around it, built of pale stone darkened by weather and smoke. Its tower is square and blunt, with narrow openings where bells wait in shadow. The graveyard wall leans in places, and the grass inside is wet, tufted and uneven over the sleeping dead. A yew tree spreads black-green branches near the porch, its trunk twisted like old rope. Some swear yew keeps away witches, wandering spirits and lightning, though no one can quite agree whether it protects the churchyard because it is holy, or because it is poisonous enough to make even evil reconsider. At the porch the priest pauses. The woman in the green cloak lowers her head. Her husband stands beside her, not touching her, his hands hidden inside his sleeves. The young man from the court has not come this far. His path for now is elsewhere under watchful eyes. This morning belongs to the church door and to the heavy space between sin and forgiveness. You step near the wall where rain trickles down a carved saint whose face has nearly vanished. The porch smells of wet stone, old wood candle smoke, and the faint sharpness of holy water. Inside, the nave is dim, lit by small flames near the altar, and by grey light leaking through narrow glass. Rushes lie scattered over the floor, worn thin by many feet. A painted rood looms above, solemn in the shadows. The walls carry saints in faded colours, red robes, blue mantles, gold halos dulled by soot. Their eyes seem patient, which is fortunate considering what they have had to watch. The priest speaks quietly with a woman just inside the doorway. You do not hear every word, and you should not. Confession is meant to be sealed, though in a town this eager even sealed things are imagined in detail. Still there is a public edge to what follows. The steward has not yet pronounced final punishment, but the church already presses its hand upon the wound. Adultery here is not only disorder among households, it is a sin against a sacrament, against vows made before God, and against the fragile trust that allows people to sleep under one roof without counting every shadow. A candle is brought out thick and pale, smelling cleanly of beeswax. It is finer than the smoky tallow dips of ordinary houses, and its flame burns with a steadier, gentler light. The priest places it in the woman's hands for a moment, not as sentence yet, but as sign. Some say penitents must hold candles while barefoot at the church door for one Sunday or 3 or more, depending on custom, priest wealth, stubbornness, and how loudly the parish has been talking. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Medieval punishment is often less a straight road than a muddy crossing, where law, shame, and local habit all put their boots in. You look at her hands round the candle. They are work hands reddened by cold water, roughened by bread ovens, flax laundry keys, and winter tasks. Whatever else is true, she has stirred pots, mended linen, carried buckets, swept hearth ash, and risen in darkness to keep a household alive. The court speaks of vows and order. The neighbours speak of scandal. The church speaks of sin. But the candlelight shows hands, and hands tell a quieter story. The priest leads a short prayer. People bow their heads, some devoutly, some because everyone else does. The husband's lips move, though, whether in prayer, anger, sorrow, or exhaustion, you cannot tell. Even now it is hard to tell whether forgiveness begins in words or only in the long labour after words are spent. Around you the church breathes cold air and candle smoke. A woman nearby fingers a string of beads, counting prayers under her breath. Beside the font a little bowl of salt rests near the holy water, for salt is believed by many to guard against corruption and evil. You think of all the things people hope salt might preserve: meat, infants, marriages, souls. When the prayer ends, the priest marks the woman lightly with holy water. It is not dramatic. No thunder shakes the tower. No painted saint steps down from the wall to clarify the matter, though frankly that might make courts much quicker. The priest simply speaks of repentance, amendment, and obedience to what judgment may come. His voice is tired, not cruel. You sense he has done this before for other sins, other quarrels, other human knots pulled tight in winter. The woman's hood remains lowered as she turns back toward the porch. For a breath she stands at the threshold, neither fully inside nor out, framed by the dark oak door and the wet brightness beyond. That place, you understand, matters. The church door is where the parish sees. It is where brides enter, infants are carried, bodies are born, oaths are remembered, and shame can be made visible. Iron chains may hold the body, but a doorway like this can hold a name. Outside, the mist has softened the town. Roofs blur. The market stalls wait empty. The dog shakes rain from its ears and nearly baptizes your boots. A few townsfolk drift away, disappointed that nothing more splendidly terrible has occurred. Others remain murmuring. The husband and wife are led down the path through the graveyard, past the yew, and the leaning stones, back toward the living world, where pottage must be stirred, fires must be coaxed, and every face at every window will remember. You linger by the church wall until the bell above you moves. Its sound pours over the town, deep and slow, carrying across wet roofs, muddy lanes, the manor hall, the alehouse, and the fields beyond the gate. You feel it in your chest. The day is only beginning, and already judgment has passed from table to altar, from ink to prayer, from rumour to ritual. You pull your cloak close and step after the others, knowing the town has not finished watching. You move with the town as it loosens from the churchyard and spills toward the market square, not quickly, because mud does not permit dignity at speed. The bell's last note fades behind you, sinking into wet roofs and crooked chimneys, while morning smoke rises in thin blue threads. Your cloak has grown heavy at the shoulders. The dog trots beside you with renewed purpose, as if the church service has confirmed his calling to supervise every public matter involving bread, fish, and emotional discomfort. By the time you reach the square, market day has begun opening like a many-pocketed purse. Canvas awnings sag under mist. Wooden trestles are set out plank by plank. A fishmonger lifts smoked eels from a barrel, their dark skins shining with oil. A woman spreads coarse linen beside dyed wool hanks in russet indigo dull saffron, and a green so sharp it looks almost cheerful despite the weather. A potter arranges bowls in careful stacks, tapping each one with a fingernail to prove it has survived the kiln and deserves a better fate than being dropped by someone's nephew. Near the town cross, a toll collector sits beneath a hooded cloak, counting coins, with the grave expression of a saint receiving relics, though with noticeably more suspicion. You pause beneath the leaning signboard and watch the square fill. Every person seems to be working, bargaining, carrying, weighing, calling, or pretending not to watch the woman in the green cloak. She's not come into the square yet, but her absence has arrived before her. That is how public shame moves here. It does not need a cart or herald. It slips beneath doors, stands by stalls, warms its hands over every brazier, and waits for the body to catch up. At the baker's board, loaves are marked with little cuts to show their size and fairness. Bread is regulated closely in towns like this because a false loaf can stir anger nearly as fast as a false vow. The baker's wife weighs around against a standard weight while muttering that damp flour makes poor crust and poorer temper. Nearby, a boy carries trenchers stacked in a basket, flat slabs of old bread to serve as plates for those who can pay for hot food later. You smell onions frying in fat ale, warming in a pot wet wool, steaming as cloaks brush too near the charcoal pans. The ordinary life of the town presses forward, and that makes the scandal sharper. Nothing stops. Everything notices. A pair of widows station themselves beside a stall of wooden spoons, not because they need spoons, you suspect, but because the location offers excellent sight lines toward the church lane. They wear dark veils pinned close and speak with the calm precision of women who have buried husbands, managed households, argued with millers, and developed a thorough understanding of human weakness. One says that public punishment is best done where everyone must buy salt, because no one forgets a lesson learned beside salt. The other replies that no one forgets anything learned besides salt, because salt is expensive and sharpens the memory. It is difficult to argue with this. Some swear that in certain towns adulterers are made to stand in the market with signs or tokens of shame, or to walk barefoot while people stare, or to pay fines announced where all can hear. Others insist such things are exaggerated by old mouths near winter fires. No one can quite agree whether the punishment lies in the act itself or in the telling afterward. Yet as you stand among baskets, barrels, scales, and damp cloaks, you understand that a market is a perfect engine for memory. A court may speak once, a market repeats forever. The toll collector raises his voice at a farmer trying to bring in a sack of peas without proper payment. Their argument draws a small crowd grateful for a scandal without theological complications. The farmer swears by St. Cuthbert's toe bone that the sack is for his sister, not for sale. The toll collector says St. Cuthbert may inspect the peas himself if he wishes, but until then the toll stands. A few people laugh. The humour is soft, practical, and edged with hunger. Everyone knows the rules are burdensome, and everyone also knows that rules are one of the few things holding the town upright. Then the woman in the green cloak enters the square with her husband beside her. Nothing dramatic happens, no one cries out, no bells ring, no fish leap from barrels in moral protest, though a particularly large eel gives the impression it has opinions. Instead, the market performs a quieter cruelty. Voices lower by a finger's width. Heads turn, then turn away too late. A wool seller folds a cloth already folded. The potter adjusts a bowl that does not need adjusting. A child points and is slapped lightly on the hand by his mother, who then looks longer than the child did. The husband stares forward. The woman keeps her hood low. You feel the weight of eyes more than any chain. It follows them across the square past smoked fish and barley sacks past the toll table, and the cross past the widows who fall silent with almost ceremonial restraint. This, you realize, can be punishment enough in a world where one's name is needed for credit, marriage, work, witness, and welcome. If neighbours do not trust you, doors close slowly, but they close. If kin are shamed, harvest help may fail to come. If laughter begins near the mill, it may reach the fields before noon. A merchant from the next parish asks too loudly what has happened, though his face says he already knows and wishes to purchase a fresher version. The fishmonger tells him to buy herring first. This is perhaps the most honest business principle in the square. Coins pass. Gossip follows. You wonder whether any court fine could match the cost of being measured like spoiled grain by every person from whom you must buy, borrow, trade, or beg. Near the town, cross a small iron collar and chain hang from a post not in use today, dark with rust and rain. A man beside you says it was once for scolds' cheats, and those who disturb the peace, though even now it is hard to tell whether he remembers this or merely enjoys sounding ancient. Beside it stand the stocks empty their wood swollen from weather. No one is locked there this morning, yet their presence speaks. Medieval towns do not always need to punish in the moment. Sometimes they simply keep their tools visible like a warning left out in the rain. The woman and her husband stop at the baker's board. She reaches for a loaf and the baker's wife hesitates only a breath too long before taking the coin. That breath is tiny. It is also enormous. You see the woman notice. Her fingers tighten around the bread. The husband notices too, and his face hardens, not at his wife, not quite at the baker's wife, but at the whole square that has placed itself between them and ordinary life. A peddler nearby tries to sell little charms against jealousy knots of coloured thread pewter badges, scraps of parchment marked with cramped blessings. He claims one charm carried near the heart prevents a spouse from wandering. A washerwoman asks whether he has sold many to his own wife. The peddler suddenly becomes deeply interested in arranging his wares. The dog sneezes, which feels like judgment from a higher court. By midday the market grows louder again. Bargains resume. Fish are wrapped. Wool is weighed. A monk from the abbey passes through with a basket of herbs, glancing once toward the couple, before lowering his eyes. You notice his ink-stained thumb when he adjusts his sleeve, though he disappears into the crowd before you can think more of it. The square continues bright with small colours against the grey day, but the path made by the woman in the green cloak remains visible in memory, like footprints filling slowly with rain. You buy a heel of bread and a cup of warm ale from a stall, then stand near the cross while the town churns around you. The punishment has not yet been pronounced, and still it has already begun. It lives in pauses, glances delayed, coins, lowered voices, and the careful silence of those who know silence can wound without leaving marks. The bell rings again from beyond the roofs, and you feel the day turning slow as a cartwheel in mud toward whatever record prayer and mercy may come next. By the time the market noise blurs into one long sound of bargaining bells, geese and wet boots, you find yourself following the monk with the ink-stained thumb toward the abbey road. You do not mean to follow him suspiciously, though there is almost no way to follow a monk without looking like either a penitent, a thief, or a lost traveller. The monk walks with his basket of herbs tucked beneath one arm, his dark habit damp at the hem, his sandals making soft sucking sounds in the mud. From the basket rise smells of sage rue fennel, and something bitter enough to cure either illness or optimism. He does not look back, but you sense he knows you are behind him. The Abbey guest house lies just beyond the town's inner bustle near a low wall furred with moss, and a gate where a lay brother is repairing a hinge with more patience than success. Beyond it the abbey buildings sit in damp order: church, cloister, dormitory, refectory, bakehouse, infirmary, herb garden, and outbuildings where smoke lifts into the grey afternoon. The place smells cleaner than the market, though not clean exactly. It smells of beeswax, boiled beans, wet stone ink, old wool and cabbage doing its best under difficult theological conditions. A guestmaster receives you with the calm suspicion owed to strangers. Travellers may sleep here if there is room, especially pilgrims, poor clerks, merchants delayed by rain, and people who look harmless enough not to steal a candlestick. You are given a place on a bench near the guest hall hearth, where a small fire burns beneath an iron hook, and a pot of thin broth trembles above it. Rushes cover the floor fresher than those in the alehouse, and lavender has been scattered among them. A beeswax candle burns near a little statue of St. Mary, its flame steady in the stiller air. The dog is not invited inside, but the dog enters anyway with the soft confidence of a minor miracle. The lay brother looks at him, looks at you, and decides this is a matter for God. The monk with the ink-stained thumb appears again at the far end of the room. He sets down his basket and unwraps the herbs onto a clean board. He is younger than you first thought, though his eyes carry the tired patience of a man who has spent many hours copying words about human virtue while hearing evidence of the opposite. His belt holds a small knife, a bunch of keys and a wax tablet scratched with notes. When the guest master brings you broth and coarse bread, the monk sits across from you. His name, he says, is Brother Martin. He does not ask yours until after he has blessed the food, which feels proper, as though names should never interrupt soup. The broth is mostly beans, leeks, and salt, but it is hot, and heat is a mercy that asks few questions. Outside, the abbey bell marks another office calling unseen brothers to prayer in a rhythm older than anyone's scandal. Brother Martin has heard of the case, of course. You can tell by the way he says he has heard a little, which in a town this size means enough to make a sermon, a court roll, and 3 competing versions by supper. He sometimes writes for the parish priest when moral offences must be remembered, accounts of penance, warnings, names that may later become burdens. Parchment, he says, tearing bread with ink-dark fingers likes clean lines. People rarely provide them. You think of the manor hall, the clerk's quill, the woman's work-reddened hands, the husband's hard jaw, the young man staring at, rushes as if they might open and swallow him. Brother Martin listens as you describe what little you saw. He does not press for more. In the alehouse, every silence was treated like a locked chest. Here, silence is allowed to remain furniture. No one can quite agree whether such matters belong first to the court or to the confessor, he says at last. The answer is usually both, which pleases neither. He explains not like a lecturer, but like a tired man arranging sticks near a fire, that adultery wounds several laws at once. It troubles the church because vows are sacred. It troubles the manor because households must remain orderly. It troubles kin because property, children, and honour are tied tighter than wool on a spindle. It troubles neighbours because neighbours are deeply troubled by the possibility of not being included. That last line is so dry you nearly miss the humour. The dog thumps his tail once, perhaps in scholarly agreement. Brother Martin takes up his wax tablet and shows you its surface cloudy with old scratches beneath new ones. Names can be rubbed smooth, he says. Parchment is less forgiving. A court roll may remember a fine long after anger has cooled. A priest may remember a penance differently from those who watched it. A husband may want silence one day and proof the next. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether writing preserves truth or merely gives rumour a longer cloak. In a corner of the guest hall, an older monk grinds oak galls for ink, crushing them with a little pestle, before mixing them with copperas and gum. The smell is sharp and earthy. Brother Martin says good ink bites the parchment and darkens with time. Words once written bite too. You imagine a name darkening over years while the body it belonged to grows old, repents, works, forgives, or is forgotten by everyone except the page. The conversation drifts to remedies because in this world sin and sickness often share shelves. Brother Martin says the infirmera keeps betony for headaches, fennel for the stomach, and rue for troubles of the blood and spirit. Some women ask for herbs to cool jealousy. Some men ask for charms against betrayal, but pretend they have come for sore knees. Even now it is hard to tell whether these remedies comfort the body, the soul, or the fear between them. Brother Martin does not mock them. A frightened person will hold whatever is handed to him, he says, as afternoon dims, rain taps at the guest house shutters. A novice trims the candle near St. Mary, and the flame rises fresh gold on vellum pale plaster. Brother Martin gathers his herbs, his tablet, and a folded scrap of parchment. Before leaving, he says that mercy is hardest to write because it often happens after the record ends. A fine is marked, a penance is noted, an oath is named. But the long work afterward, the shared hearth, the watched doorway, the first ordinary word spoken without bitterness rarely finds a line. You sit with that as the bell sounds again. Outside, the dog noses the door until the lay brother sighs and opens it. Cold air enters, smelling of wet earth and evening fields. Brother Martin crosses the yard toward the cloister, his ink-stained hand tucked into his sleeve, carrying the town's tangled story toward whatever page can bear it. You leave the abbey after the evening bell has softened into rain, stepping through the moss-furred gate, with your cloak pulled close, and your stomach warmed by beans, coarse bread, and the sort of broth that seems designed less to delight the tongue than to persuade the body to continue negotiations. Behind you the guest-house glows faintly through horn panes. Brother Martin has gone back toward his cloister, with his herbs and ink-stained fingers carrying the tangled matter of the town somewhere between prayer and parchment. Ahead, the road bends beyond the last cottages toward the next parish, where fields lie open and black under the weather. The dog follows naturally, because by now he appears to consider your journey a joint legal inquiry, with intermittent opportunities for scraps. The rain is not hard, only persistent, the kind that seems too mild to complain about, until it has quietly entered your sleeves, your boots, your patience, and possibly your soul. The road is a ribbon of mud between low hedges beaten by carts, hooves, pilgrims, drovers, beggars, clerks, and every other moving creature that medieval life sends from one uncertain shelter to another. Ruts hold silver water. Bare branches lean over the lane. Here and there hazel rods have been woven into fences, and beyond them you see winter fields sleeping under stubble pale with frost at the edges. A small company of travellers has gathered on the road ahead, moving slowly under the same grey sky. There are 2 pilgrims with badges pinned to their hats, a woman leading a pack pony, a man with a staff and a bundle, and a barefoot youth who is not barefoot by holy intention, you suspect, but because his shoes have given up before he has. One pilgrim wears a scallop shell. The other has a little pewter image of a saint whose face has been rubbed nearly smooth by fingers and weather. Pilgrim badges are small things, but they speak loudly. They tell innkeepers, priests, toll collectors, and suspicious strangers that a person has gone somewhere difficult for a reason that may be piety, illness, guilt, hope habit, or a complicated mixture of all 5. You fall into step with them because roads invite company, especially when the woods draw close. The woman with the pony nods to you, then to the dog, and says, "The dog has chosen well for a traveller with a dog, looks less lonely and slightly less edible to wolves." You accept this compliment on behalf of both of you. The man with the bundle offers you a strip of smoked fish from a cloth, and you trade a piece of bread from the market. Such exchanges are small but important. On a medieval road, trust may begin with food, though it can also end there if the fish has been badly kept. The pilgrims have heard of the town scandal by now. Of course they have. News travels by road like smoke through rafters, seeping into every crack. One says that in his village a wife accused of adultery was sent to a shrine 2 days away carrying a candle and walking without a hood. Another says a man who sinned with another's wife had to pay for a new altar cloth and fast on Fridays until Lent, which seems to you a punishment carefully designed by people who value both morality and textiles. No one can quite agree whether pilgrimage truly cleans a name or only gives the name enough miles to grow quieter. The road passes a stone cross at a turning its arms worn blunt by weather. At its base lie little offerings, a wilted sprig of rosemary, a bent nail, a crust, a bead, and a strip of red cloth tied around the shaft. Some swear that tying cloth at a wayside cross can bind a quarrel cool jealousy or keep a husband from straying beyond the parish boundary, though others insist it merely decorates the rain. The barefoot youth touches the stone as he passes. The woman with the pony crosses herself. You do the same, partly from respect, partly because everyone else has, and partly because in this century it is wise not to offend any object with a long memory. As you walk, the talk turns from punishment to repair. That is what the road does. The town square had eyes, the manor hall had questions, the church door had shame, but the open road has space enough for people to imagine what happens afterward. A pilgrim says a guilty spouse might confess, accept penance, give alms and make a vow before a saint's relic. Perhaps a wax candle equal to the length of the body, perhaps coin for the poor, perhaps a promise to sleep apart for a season, perhaps a pilgrimage made together if the marriage can bear the journey. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on which vows are demanded and which are offered in desperation. Yet all agree on one thing: forgiveness costs something even when freely given. Near a hollow where willows grow you pass a little chapel with a sagging roof and a door swollen by damp. Inside, visible through the half-open door, a lamp burns before a reliquary set behind ironwork. The pilgrims stop. The woman ties the pony to a post. You step in after them, ducking beneath the lintel into a space smelling of cold stone, beeswax, wet cloak and old dust. The reliquary is small, shaped like a house, painted red and gold with a cloudy bit of glass through which nothing can clearly be seen. A finger bone, one traveller whispers, a saint's tooth, says another. A splinter from a holy staff, says the man with the bundle. Even now it is hard to tell whether the relic is what people say it is, but faith in a dim chapel is often less concerned with inventory than with need. The pilgrims kneel. The barefoot youth bows his head as if the whole road has finally become too heavy. You stand near the wall listening to the rain tick on the roof. You think of the woman in the green cloak and wonder whether she will be sent somewhere like this, whether she will kneel before some uncertain relic while neighbours imagine her every tear. Perhaps she will carry a candle. Perhaps her husband will walk beside her in silence. Perhaps he will refuse. Perhaps the punishment will be silver or shame or prayer said aloud while the parish watches. Perhaps all of these. Medieval justice seldom travels alone. A laykeeper emerges from behind a screen wrapped in a patched brown cloak. He offers the pilgrims little wax tokens for a coin stamped with the sign of the chapel's saint. He says they protect households from discord if placed above the hearthbeam. The woman with the pony buys one. The man with the bundle asks whether it works. The keeper replies that it works best in houses where people also try not to betray each other. This is probably the soundest theology you've heard all day. Back outside, dusk gathers in the hedges. You share the last of your bread beneath an ash tree while the dog receives a fish skin and regards it as legal tender. The road ahead darkens toward the next parish, where a tower bell waits beyond the fields. You walk on through the cold rain, each step sucking softly from the mud, carrying with you the thought that punishment may be public, but repentance often begins in lonely places, under a roadside cross before a doubtful relic, beside a spouse who may or may not take your hand again. By the time the pilgrim road climbs out of the wet fields, dusk has thickened into a blue-black fold over the land, and the rain has become a finer thing, almost mist, though it still finds every weakness in your cloak with priestly dedication. The travellers from the road part ways near a fork marked by a leaning stone cross. The woman with the pony turns toward the next parish. The barefoot youth follows the bell sound through the trees, and the man with the bundle gives the dog a final scrap of fish skin, securing the animal's respect for at least 3 more miles. You continue toward the keep that rises beyond the hill, its torches pricking the dark like small watchful stars. Its walls are not beautiful in the gentle sense. They are beautiful the way a locked chest is beautiful to someone who owns what is inside. High stone, narrow slits, a gatehouse with iron hinges and a ditch filled with black water announce that this is a place where power sleeps under wool blankets and wakes with armed men nearby. Your boots suck softly from the mud as you approach, and the air smells of wet leaves, horse breath, torch pitch, and smoke from great hearths hidden behind stone. At the outer gate, a guard in a padded jack asks your business. You give the name of the Abbey guestmaster, mention the pilgrim road, and produce a small token Brother Martin pressed into your palm before you left. Not a relic, not quite a letter, only a wax-marked scrap saying that you are harmless, damp, and in need of shelter. This, in the Middle Ages, is nearly a full biography. The guard studies it. Studies the dog, and seems least convinced by the dog. Still, the gate opens. Inside the yard, the keep lives in layers of noise. Grooms lead steaming horses beneath a lean-to. A scullion hurries past with a wooden bucket sloshing grey water. 2 men carry a basket of firewood between them, and a woman in a russet gown shakes rain from a bundle of rushes meant for the hall floor. Near the kitchen door, the smell of roasting meat drifts through smoke mingling with onions ale and the sharper scent of vinegar used to clean tables before noble people make them dirty again. Medieval refinement, you notice, often begins with someone else's cold hands. You're brought into the great hall, where torchlight and firelight climb the walls in restless gold. Tapestries hang against the stone to keep out the bitter draught showing hunting scene saints, and one very solemn unicorn that appears to regret attending. Benches line the room. A long table has been laid with trenchers, knives, pewter cups and little dishes of salt. At the high end beneath a canopy, the Lord's household gathers in fur-lined cloaks and better wool than anyone wore in the town below. Their colours are deeper too, indigo, wine red, dark green saffron trim, soft brown lined with marten. Even their dampness seems more expensive. You are placed low in the hall among lesser guests near a servant with flower on her sleeve, and a clerk with a sealed packet tucked beneath his arm. The dog is persuaded to remain under the bench by means of a bone which he accepts as though negotiating a treaty. Supper comes slowly, coarse bread for the lower tables, better white loaves above pottage thickened with leeks, smoked fish, roast fowl, carried past with a fragrance almost rude in its confidence. The Lord Steward, different from the manor steward in town, grander in belt and colder in eye, moves between tables, speaking softly to men who listen too carefully. You soon sense the scandal here is not absent. It has merely learned to wear velvet shoes. No one says adultery aloud, not at first. At the high table, a lady with a pearl-edged veil keeps her face turned toward the fire. A knight beside her laughs at something too late. Another woman, older, watches both of them with the calm expression of someone counting debts. A sealed letter lies near the Lord's cup, its wax still unbroken. The clerk near you touches the packet beneath his arm and looks toward the steward, then away. Some swear that noble secrets are safer than peasant secrets, because stone walls are thick, but those who tell the tale never fully agree. Thick walls hold echoes, and servants have ears sharpened by years of being treated like furniture. A page pours ale into cups, careful not to spill. A boy turns the spit by the kitchen passage, blinking through smoke. A laundress passes, carrying folded linen, and 2 waiting women lean together over a chest of embroidery threads. The household seems orderly, yet a strange tension sits beneath the clatter. Noble adultery is not merely a sin here, nor even only a wound to marriage. It is danger to alliances, inheritances, dowries, bloodlines, and treaties written in careful hands. Among peasants, a broken vow may disturb a household. Among nobles, it may disturb 3 families, 2 estates, and a bishop who was hoping to enjoy Lent in peace. The clerk beside you finally speaks, perhaps because you are a stranger, and therefore a temporary cupboard for dangerous thoughts. He says a letter has come from the lady's brother, or perhaps from her husband's cousin. No one can quite agree whether the accusation began with jealousy politics or a real meeting in a chapel garden after Vespers. That uncertainty matters less than the risk. A noblewoman's reputation is part of her family's armour. A nobleman's offence may be excused as weakness if useful men protect him, or punished fiercely if enemies find advantage. Justice at this height wears gloves. Soft gloves, expensive gloves, gloves that leave fewer fingerprints. After supper you're sent with other lesser folk toward the lower end of the hall, while the high company withdraws behind an oak door banded with iron. The sealed letter goes with them. So does the steward, the clerk, and the older woman with the debt-counting eyes. The door closes. Conversation at the lower tables rises instantly, though softly. Servants guess. Guards pretend not to listen. A groom claims that a hawk refused to fly that morning, which he considers an omen of household disorder. A cook replies that the hawk refused because it is spoiled, overfed, and smarter than most men in spurs. In the rushes near your boot you find a little charm made of red thread and a tiny thorn tied together. A maid notices you looking and whispers that such knots are sometimes hidden near doorways to catch envy before it enters a room. Even now it's hard to tell whether envy needs catching, but in a noble hall where smiles are polished and knives are always within reach, the idea feels sensible enough. The oak door remains closed for a long while. Behind it, punishment may be arranged without witnesses. A lady sent to a convent for a season, a lover dispatched to a distant estate, a marriage contract renegotiated, a servant dismissed a letter, burned a confession, managed quietly before a priest who understands the value of silence. No market jeers here, no barefoot walk past fish stalls. Shame is wrapped, sealed, and carried through corridors by candlelight. Yet you feel it all the same, colder perhaps, because it is hidden. Late in the night the door opens. No one announces anything. The lady with the pearl-edged veil passes through the hall, with two women beside her, face pale and still. The knight does not follow. The steward gives orders to a groom, and a horse is readied in the yard despite the rain. The sealed letter is gone. The clerk's fingers are ink-stained and his mouth is tight. You lie that night on a pallet near the lower wall, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells faintly of cedar smoke and other travellers. The fire sinks low. The dog turns twice and settles against your side. Above noble footsteps fade behind private doors. You think of the woman in the green cloak watched by a whole market, and of this lady vanishing into corridors where shame speaks in whispers. The punishments are different, but the fear beneath them is kin, the fear that desire may loosen the knots by which society ties land, blood, bread, and name together. Morning in the keep arrives behind shuttered windows grey and guarded with the bell from the chapel, striking through stone walls as if even time must ask permission before entering. You wake on your pallet near the lower end of the hall, stiff from the boards beneath the rushes, and warm only where the dog has pressed against your side like a living foot-warmer with questionable manners. The great hearth is being coaxed back to life by a scullion with red knuckles who blows into the embers until they glow beneath ash. Smoke rises, then hesitates under the rafters, choosing, as smoke often does, to visit everyone personally before leaving. Servants move in the dimness with the quiet haste of people who know that noble houses wake hungry. A maid scatters fresh rushes over the worst of yesterday's mud and grease. Another carries a wooden bucket toward the buttery. A boy scrapes trenchers into a pail for the pigs, while the cook's voice travels from the kitchen passage, already accusing someone of ruining something. Breakfast for the lower tables is coarse bread, small ale, and a bit of cheese sharp enough to defend itself. At the high table, covered dishes wait beneath cloths. Rank, you notice, begins before sunrise and is served with better butter. The lady with the pearl-edged veil is gone. That is the first thing people do not say. Her chair stands empty near the high end, and no one looks at it for long. The knight from last night appears later dressed for riding his face drawn but not ruined. Men greet him carefully, some with lowered voices, some with the brisk courtesy offered to a man whose trouble may yet become dangerous to others. He drinks from a pewter cup, speaks with the steward, and is given bread. No one moves away from him in the manner you saw at the market when the woman in the green cloak crossed the square. His shame, if shame it is, has room around it. It is unpleasant, perhaps costly, but not allowed to swallow him whole. You watch this with the slow discomfort of understanding. In the town, a wife's suspected adultery has spread over her like spilled dye. Here a nobleman's desire is treated as misjudgment, weakness, temptation, even strategy if some flatterer is shameless enough. A woman's desire is treated as a breach in the wall. Through it, people imagine false heirs, broken dowries, rival claims, insults to fathers and brothers, and the collapse of careful alliances. No one can quite agree whether medieval society fears sin most, or disorder, or the thought of property passing through the wrong cradle. Perhaps it fears all three so tightly that it cannot tell them apart. Near the buttery door, two laundresses whisper as they fold linen still faintly damp from washing. Their hands are cracked from lie, their sleeves rolled, their backs bent over the work that keeps noble bodies clean enough to appear honourable. One says the lady has been sent to her aunt's house until matters are cooled. The other says a convent would cool them better. Then both glance around, because linen hears everything, and repeats nothing, but people are less reliable. A strip of rosemary hangs above the doorway, tied there to sweeten the air and guard against ill luck. Some swear rosemary strengthens memory and fidelity alike, though even now it is hard to tell whether it helps marriages, or merely helps people remember who has harmed them. The steward crosses the hall with the clerk at his side. The clerk's fingers are darker than yesterday, ink caught beneath the nails. He carries folded parchment sealed now with wax. A written thing has happened while you slept, and written things in noble houses often move faster than spoken ones. A servant may be dismissed before dinner, a horse sent to carry a letter, before terse a bride's portion questioned, before anyone admits there is a question. The great oak door from last night remains closed, but its silence has entered every corner. At the lower table a groom mutters that if a stable boy had been caught with a married woman, he would be lucky to keep his place, his wages, or his skin unbruised by her kin. A carter says if a lord does the same, men call it appetite and pour him more wine. The cook passing with a basin snaps that men have always named their own sins more gently. Then she disappears into steam before anyone can decide whether to laugh. You think of Brother Martin at the Abbey saying parchment likes clean lines. This hall has no clean lines. It has rank gender blood money and fear braided together like a cord too old to untie. Later you pass through the yard where the rain has stopped but everything still drips. A farrier works near the stable, rasping a hoof while the horse leans sleepily against him. Chickens scratch near a dung heap with the confidence of creatures untroubled by inheritance law. Beside the well a young maid stands apart, eyes red, gripping a bundle wrapped in cloth. She is being sent away, someone says, not the lady, not the knight. A maid who carried a message opened a door, knew too much, or simply stood too near the wrong secret. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether servants in such scandals are punished for helping, witnessing, tempting, or being convenient. Convenient guilt, you are learning, is one of society's oldest tools. She receives no public hearing that you can see. No steward asks sworn neighbours to weigh her good name. No priest places a candle in her hands at the church door. She's given a coin, perhaps, wages, perhaps, silence, perhaps both, and a bundle of her own few things. A woman from the kitchen presses something into her palm, maybe bread, maybe a charm, maybe both, because hunger and fear often travel together. The maid tucks it away and leaves by the side gate, walking with her head low into the pale road beyond the ditch. The dog watches her go without barking, which feels like more courtesy than the household has managed. By midday, the knight rides out with 2 men beside him. His cloak is good wool, his horse well fed, his boots polished above the mud. His departure has the shape of business. Perhaps he's sent away until talk cools. Perhaps he carries a letter of apology. Perhaps he's being removed before someone's brother arrives with sharper intentions. No one can quite agree, and no one who knows will tell. At the gate he turns once toward the keep, then rides on. The guards watch him with respect still intact. Inside, the empty chair remains. The lady's women sort through a chest of embroidery silks, indigo and saffron threads, bright against the gloom, and their faces reveal nothing. Her absence is managed folded, and put away like fine linen. Yet the household feels changed. Servants step softer. The steward speaks less. The old woman with debt-counting eyes sits by the fire and turns a ring on her finger again and again, perhaps praying, perhaps planning, perhaps doing both as wise people often do. Toward evening you stand near a narrow window overlooking the road. The sky is low and pewter-coloured. Smoke from the kitchen twists upward. Somewhere below the maid is already a small figure in memory, the knight, hoofbeat, fading the lady a sealed room. You think of the town's market eyes, of the church door, of fines and candles and whispers. Punishment, you see, does not fall like rain evenly over all heads. It follows channels cut by power, sex, wealth and usefulness. Some are drenched. Some are merely damp. Some hold the umbrella. The chapel bell sounds again, and you turn from the window as the hall prepares for another supper. Bread is sliced. Ale is poured. The rushes are stirred. The dog noses hopefully at a trencher. Life gathers itself as it always does around food and fire. Yet beneath the ordinary sounds you hear the quiet lesson of the day in this world. Honour is guarded more fiercely than happiness, and when vows break, the sharpest pieces are not given equally to every hand. After supper, when the keep settles behind you with its guarded doors, sealed letters and noble silences, you step back onto the road that slopes toward the village below. The night has cleared at last. Clouds drag themselves eastward in torn grey folds, and a thin moon hangs above the fields like a coin someone has tried to bite and found wanting. Your cloak is still damp at the hem. Your boots remember every rut since the town gate, and the dog trots beside you with the solemn confidence of a beast who has attended court, church, market, abbey, and noble scandal without once being asked for testimony. The air smells of wet earth, cold grass, wood smoke, and distant cattle. Below the hill, cottages crouch along the lane, their thatch silvered by moonlight. A few rushlights burn behind shutters of oiled cloth. Somewhere a baby cries and is hushed. Somewhere a woman lifts a pot from the hearth. Somewhere a man bars an oak door with the final heavy sound that says, "The day has done enough harm, and may now stay outside." You might think the village is preparing to sleep. Then from the far end of the lane comes the first hollow clang of a pot struck with a stick. The dog stops. You stop with him. Another clang follows, then another, joined by a wooden rattle, a horn blown badly enough to distress both music and livestock, and a chorus of voices rising through the cold. It is not singing exactly. It is not shouting exactly. It is something between a song, a joke, a warning, and a cart accident. You follow the sound down the lane, keeping to the shadow of a hedge where frost has begun to brighten the leaves. A crowd has gathered outside a low cottage with smoke leaking from its roof hole. Men, women, and older youths stand in a rough half-circle wrapped in cloaks and hoods, their breath white in the moonlight. One man beats a frying pan with an iron spoon. Another scrapes a stick along a washboard. 2 boys swing cowbells by their straps. A woman blows through a crooked horn and looks deeply pleased with the terrible result. If angels ever descend for village harmony, you suspect they turn back before the second verse. This is a charivari or something near it, though names shift from place to place. Some swear it is called rough music, some call it skimmington. Some say such customs belong more to one region than another, and no one can quite agree whether they begin as punishment, warning entertainment, or the village's ancient need to make noise at other people's windows. Tonight the reason is clear enough from the verses being chanted in fragments. A married man who has been slipping where he should not, a wife who has taken him back too quickly or not quickly enough, a lover whose door has become too familiar after dusk. The details blur because the ritual is not interested in fairness the way a clerk is. It is interested in being heard. You stand near a stack of bundled firewood and listen as the crowd circles. The cottage door remains shut. A faint candle burns inside. The person within, whoever bears the night's shame, does not come out. Perhaps he is guilty. Perhaps she is. Perhaps both are. Perhaps the village has been waiting years for an excuse to punish a household already disliked for thin ale unpaid debts or geese that wander into gardens. Those who tell the tale never fully agree afterward. By morning everyone will remember the noise more clearly than the truth. An old woman beside you taps a ladle against a wooden bowl with steady dignity. She says such noise drives disorder back under the roof where it belongs. Another woman replies that disorder usually lives quite comfortably indoors and only opens the window when invited. They both continue tapping. Nearby a man carries an effigy made from straw tied in old sleeves, its head a turnip with charcoal eyes. Someone has pinned a scrap of red cloth to its chest. Some believe red thread catches lust, envy and wandering thoughts, though even now it is hard to tell whether the thread catches anything except soot. The effigy is lifted on a pole and paraded before the cottage. The crowd laughs, but the laughter has edges. No one strikes the door, no one breaks the shutters, yet the noise presses hard against the little house, entering through every crack. Public shame in the market was sharp because it watched. This is sharp because it refuses to let silence survive. It says we know, we remember, we judge, and we have brought cookware. You find yourself thinking of the manor court with its sworn neighbours, and parchment the church porch with its candle and holy water, the noble hall with its sealed oak door. Here there is no steward, no clerk, no priest lifting his hand. Here the village itself performs judgment beneath the moon. It is older feeling, rougher, less tidy. It belongs to lanes, hedges, hearth quarrels, shared wells, and the terrifying fact that everyone knows when your shutters close. A fiddler appears from somewhere sawing a thin tune over the clatter. The rhythm catches and the crowd begins a slow, mocking procession around the cottage. One man wears his coat inside out, a sign of the world turned wrong. Another rides backward on a donkey led by a laughing boy, which may be a symbolic act of social inversion or simply the best entertainment the village can afford after dark. Medieval comedy, like medieval medicine, often works by making the patient suffer near an animal. Yet the mood never becomes merry enough to be harmless. You sense the fear beneath it. Adultery, mismatched marriage, household rebellion, a spouse mocked as weak, a lover treated as thief. These things unsettle the village because a household is part of the village's fence. If one rail loosens, people imagine others loosening too. The charivari hammers the rail back in with sound. At last, after enough noise to wake saints' hens and possibly the dead with strong opinions, the cottage door opens a crack. A man's voice speaks from within. You cannot hear the words, but the tone is low and pleading. An elder steps forward, staff in hand, and answers. The clatter fades by degrees. A final horn gives one sad accidental bellow. Then the crowd begins to scatter, satisfied or merely cold. You remain by the firewood stack as moonlight settles again over the lane. The dog noses a fallen crust near the road and eats it with the calm of one who forgives public disorder when snacks are involved. Inside the cottage the candle still burns. Outside footprints and trampled frost mark where judgment danced in a circle. You pull your cloak close and walk on toward the next dark bend, hearing behind you a few last chuckles, the soft knock of ladles against bowls, and then only the returning hush of village night. Shame, you realize, has many instruments. Quill candle coin, locked door, and sometimes a pan beaten beneath the moon, until a whole household trembles awake. You walk until the last echoes of the charivari are folded into the dark behind you, until the village lane gives way to a narrower track bordered by hedges, wet ditches, and fields silvered under the moon. The night grows quieter by degrees. First the pots and horns fade. Then the voices fade. Then even the memory of laughter thins into the sound of your own boots lifting from mud. The dog trots ahead, pauses, looks back, as if checking that you're still fit for travel, and continues with the grave patience of a guide who accepts no coin and very little responsibility. Cold settles over the land before dawn. It comes low from the ground upward through wet leather, through wool, through the small gaps in your courage. Frost gathers along the hedge thorns. The ruts in the road harden at their edges. Somewhere beyond the fields unseen, sheep shift in a pen, and from a distant farmstead comes the dull knock of someone breaking ice on a water trough. Medieval mornings do not arrive gently. They test the household before breakfast, which seems excessive, but no one has yet invented complaint departments. You keep moving because stillness is colder. The track bends toward a stand of bare ash trees, and there where 3 lanes meet a little roadside shrine leans beneath a roof of weather-blackened shingles. It is no grand chapel, like the one by the Pilgrim Road, only a stone niche set into a low wall with a painted figure of St. Margaret or St. Anne, or perhaps the Virgin herself. The face has been softened by rain and candle soot, until no one can quite agree who watches from within. A wooden rail stands before it, polished by hands. At its foot lie offerings, a cracked bead, 3 pins, a ribbon faded to the colour of old blood, a twist of wool, and a little clay lamp gone cold. A few travellers are already gathered there, hunched against the morning. You see the woman with the pack pony from yesterday, her animal blowing mist into the dark. Beside her kneels an older man in a patch cloak, and near the rail stands a young wife with a blue kerchief pulled low around her face. A boy holds a bundle of kindling and stamps his feet for warmth. No one speaks loudly. Dawn shrines invite whispers, perhaps because the world itself seems half asleep and easily startled. You step under the ash branches and lower your head. The dog sniffs the offerings, decides the saint has no edible policy, and sits beside your boot. A woman lights a small candle from a covered ember, carried in a clay pot, coaxing the flame with careful breath. Fire in this world is not merely struck whenever desired. It is guarded, banked, carried, borrowed, and blessed. A live coal wrapped in ash may travel from hearth to hearth like a tiny red inheritance. The candle catches at last its flame bending in the cold air, and the shrine's painted face glimmers softly from the shadows. The young wife ties a strip of blue thread to the rail with trembling fingers. The older man murmurs that blue calms quarrels if knotted before sunrise. The woman with the pony says it must be tied with the left hand or it only calms goats. No one smiles much, but the boy snorts into his sleeve. Some swear that threads tied at crossroads can bind a wandering heart, while others insist such knots merely give sorrow something to do with its hands. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the charm belongs to faith habit, or the deep human need to make pain visible and small enough to fasten to wood, You kneel among them on the frosted earth. The cold comes through your knees at once. The shrine smells of wax-damp moss, wet bark, and the faint sourness of old flowers. Beyond the trees the sky begins to pale, not blue yet, but less black, like linen washed too many times. The travellers pray in murmurs. One asks for safe roads. One asks for a child's fever to break. The young wife asks barely louder than breath for her husband's heart to come home, though whether from anger, another woman, drink, grief, or simple distance you cannot know, the words settle over you. After courts and markets, after church doors and noble halls, this little shrine feels softer and more helpless, which may be why it matters. No steward sits here to name fines. No clerk waits to darken parchment. No crowd beats pans beneath the moon. Here people bring the parts of a marriage no law can mend the silence after supper. The hand withdrawn under a blanket, the door left unlatched too late, the glance that does not return the forgiveness spoken, but not yet believed. These things have no clear punishment and no simple cure. So people offer wax thread, pins, salt prayers and promises. It is not much, it is what they have. The older man takes from his pouch a tiny charm wrapped in linen. He shows it to the woman with the pony who squints in the grey light. Inside are dried rosemary, a shaving of church candle wax and a crumb of bread from a wedding feast, preserved so long it looks more like gravel than joy. He says it should be placed above the hearth beam to keep spouses speaking kindly. The boy asks whether it works if the spouses are already shouting. The old man replies that then one needs a larger beam. It is a small joke dry as winter thatch, and it warms the group more than it ought. You think of the woman in the green cloak. Perhaps she too will stand at a rail like this after the court is done with her tying thread in the first light, while her neighbours sleep or pretend to. Perhaps her husband will come beside her. Perhaps he will not. No one can quite agree whether repentance is proven by tears, by fasting, by coin, by a long pilgrimage, or by the patient return to ordinary kindness. You suspect ordinary kindness may be the hardest penance of all, because it must be repeated when no one watches. The sky brightens. A bell rings faintly from some unseen chapel thin across the fields. The woman with the pony removes a small loaf from her basket and breaks it, sharing pieces among the gathered travellers. The bread is coarse and cold, but you eat gratefully. The boy passes around a wooden cup of ale, so weak it might be rain with ambitions. Still, it loosens the frost in your throat. The dog receives a crust and looks briefly prepared to convert. Before leaving, each traveller touches the rail. You do the same. The wood is slick with dew and worn smooth by years of troubled hands. For a breath you feel all those hands with yours jealous, guilty, faithful, frightened, angry, hopeful, cold. Medieval society can punish adultery with shame, fines, penance, exile, rough music, and silence behind oak doors, but here at the roadside shrine you sense the quieter truth. Punishment may force a body to stand in public. It cannot teach two people how to sit together again by the same fire. You rise slowly as dawn opens over the fields. Smoke begins to lift from distant cottages. Somewhere a cartwheel creaks, perhaps broken, perhaps only old and dramatic. The travellers gather their bundles, the pony shakes its mane, and the dog trots toward the road as if he has seen enough mercy for one morning. You follow, carrying the candlelit hush of the shrine with you, while frost softens under the first pale light. The road carries you onward from the little shrine into a morning that never quite becomes warm. Dawn spreads pale over the fields, touching the frost on hedges, the wet backs of sheep, the rutted lane, and the low roofs of scattered farmsteads, where smoke rises slowly blue and uncertain. Your knees still remember the cold earth before the saints' rail. Your fingers smell faintly of damp wood and candle soot. The dog moves ahead with his nose low, reading the road, as if every hoof-print, crust, and questionable puddle were a line of Holy Scripture. By mid-morning you reach a manor grange beyond the next village. A cluster of barns sheds byres and storehouses gathered around a muddy yard. A cart stands tilted near the gate, with one wheel cracked, its spokes bound hastily with rope, and you recognise with weary amusement that even broken cartwheels seem to follow this journey like minor prophecies. Men are unloading sacks of rye from another wagon, while a woman in a brown wool gown counts under her breath. Chickens scratch beneath a hurdle fence. A pig watches you from behind a wattle pen with the expression of a creature who knows too much and will say nothing unless fed. The yard smells of straw-dung, cold smoke, stored apples, damp wool, and grain dust. It is not unpleasant exactly. It is the smell of survival kept under roofs. A steward's assistant stands near the granary door with a wax tablet and a tally stick, marking what comes in and what must be held back for seed-rent household bread-ale making and the long, hungry stretch before spring. A pair of iron keys hangs from the belt of the woman counting sacks, and you remember the Reeves keys at the manor hall, the husband's hard face, the church candle in work, reddened hands. Keys in this world are not small things. They mean trust. They mean storage. They mean who may open the chest, the pantry, the linen coffer, the door after dark. You're given leave to warm yourself near the kitchen building, where a great pot hangs from an iron hook above the fire. Inside, pottage thickens with peas, onions, barley, and chopped greens that have survived the frost through stubbornness or divine neglect. A kitchen maid stirs with a wooden paddle nearly as tall as she is. Another kneads coarse dough on a floured board, her sleeves rolled above red wrists. Near the wall, smoked fish hangs from hooks and bunches of herbs dry from a beam, sage, rosemary, thyme, and rue. Some swear rue hung in a kitchen keeps away envy and ill-wishing, though no one can quite agree whether it protects the household or merely makes soup taste as if it has been warned. The mistress of the grange, a broad-shouldered woman with a fur-lined hood and flower on one cheek, lets you sit by the wall with a cup of weak ale. She has heard of the adultery case in town because even sacks of rye have apparently been gossiping on the road. She does not ask what you know. She tells you what she thinks, which is different and far more efficient. Folk speak of desire, she says, cutting dough into rounds. But desire does not count winter stores. You watch her hands. They move quickly, pressing, turning, dividing. Around her the household runs by tasks so ordinary they nearly disappear. A girl skimming fat from a pot, a boy bringing in billets of wood, an old man twisting straw rope, a servant checking cheese beneath cloth, someone carrying clean rushes toward the hall. Every loaf, every candle, every bucket, every blanket must be planned. Marriage here is not only a bed and a vow, it is labour paired against hunger. It is two families trusting that the child at the hearth belongs within the inheritance, that the dowry was not wasted, that the wife keeps the stores honestly, that the husband's name will pass to the right heir, that kin will arrive at harvest because honour still binds them. No one can quite agree whether broken trust hurts first in the heart or first in the pantry. In a place like this, the two are closer than poets admit. At midday you follow the mistress across the yard to the winter storehouse. The door is oak banded with iron, and it opens with a groan that sounds almost offended. Inside the air is colder and drier. Sacks of grain stand in rows. Apples are packed in straw. Cheeses rest on shelves. Bundles of onions hang from rafters. Salted meat lies in barrels beneath weighted lids. The mistress lifts a small charm from a peg near the door, a plait of straw bound with red thread, and a tiny scrap of parchment marked by a priest. She says it keeps mice away if blessed properly, though her raised eyebrow suggests the cats deserve more credit. Still, she hangs it back carefully. A household survives by such carefulness. Count the grain, lock the door, bank the fire, watch the children, mend the linen, salt the meat, share enough to keep kin loyal, but not so much that March becomes cruel. When adultery enters such a household, it brings questions that cannot be stored neatly on shelves. Who has the right to the marriage goods? Will the husband cast the wife out? Will her kin demand return of dowry if a child is doubted who inherits the strip field, the cow, the chest? The tools, will neighbours still lend oxen? Will servants stay? Will the Lord's court fine the household when it can least spare silver? Shame, you see, is not only a feeling, it is a force that can loosen the beams of daily life. In the yard, the cracked cartwheel is being repaired by two men with cold hands and worse tempers. One says that a household after adultery is like a wheel with a hidden split. It may roll for a while, then fail in the worst mud. The other replies that most wheels are hidden, splits by Candlemas, which is perhaps less comforting than he intends. The dog lies nearby, chewing a straw twist untroubled by metaphor. Later in the barn you watch threshers beat grain from sheaves with steady wooden flails. Dust rises gold in the slanting light. Their rhythm is slow, almost hypnotic, lift, fall. An old tenant tells you that some families place a loaf baked from the first flower of the season beneath the marriage bed to keep peace between spouses. Others, he says, hide a knife there to cut betrayal before it grows. Even now it is hard to tell whether such customs reveal belief fear or the quiet knowledge that marriage needs all the help a household can hide beneath a mattress. As afternoon fades, the grange gathers inward. Doors are barred. Animals are fed. The pottage is ladled into wooden bowls and you eat near the kitchen fire while frost returns to the yard outside. The mistress sits with her keys beside her, listening to the wind press around the shutters. For a while no one speaks of scandal. They speak instead of seed grain, a sick ewe, a roof that needs thatch, the broken wheel, the price of salt, the abbey bell that rang late yesterday, and whether the road will freeze by morning. Yet beneath these ordinary words you feel the shape of the deeper matter. Medieval punishment is not only meant to avenge a vow, it is meant to protect this fragile web of bred labour blood and trust from tearing. Whether it succeeds is another question one no court roll can answer. Night lowers over the barns. You curl near the hearth with a wool blanket around your shoulders, the dog warm against your boots. In the rafters, herbs sway faintly in the smoke. Beyond the locked storehouse door, grain waits in the dark, and you understand why this world fears disorder so fiercely. Winter is long, food is counted, names matter, trust is a roof, and roofs once cracked let in more than rain. Before dawn, frost silvering the yard and the storehouse lock stiff beneath the mistress's hand, you leave the grange with the taste of coarse bread still in your mouth and the smell of smoke tucked deep into your cloak. The road back toward town lies pale under a thin crust of ice, each rut hardened into a ridge that tests your ankles with quiet malice. The dog goes ahead, stops, looks back, and seems to decide that if humans insist on revisiting places where they have already been damp and uncomfortable, he may as well continue his professional supervision. The broken cartwheel has been mended enough to turn, and a carter heading toward the town gate lets you walk beside his wagon. It groans under sacks of onions, a crate of hens, and 2 barrels of small ale that slosh whenever the road dips. His cloak is patched at both shoulders. His beard is white with frost. He tells you without being asked that judgment is expected today. News like cold enters everything. He has heard that the priest has spoken with the husband, the steward has taken counsel, the kin have argued, and the sworn neighbours have remembered more than any household could wish. No one can quite agree whether this means mercy is near or punishment has merely sharpened its knife on patience. By the time the town walls rise ahead, the sun is a pale coin behind cloud, giving light but little warmth. Smoke lifts from chimneys. The gatekeeper from your first evening recognizes you, or perhaps recognizes the dog and waves you through with the sleepy suspicion of a man whose day began before his temper. Inside, the town feels both ordinary and expectant. A woman shakes rushes from a doorway. Apprentices carry hides toward the tanner's yard. The baker's oven breathes heat into the lane. Somewhere a child cries because his hands are cold, which is one of the more honest morning prayers. You pass the roadside shrine near the gate where the faded saint still watches through smoke-dark paint. Someone has added a fresh beeswax nub and a sprig of rosemary tied with blue thread. Some swear rosemary keeps memory true and blue thread cools anger, though even now it is hard to tell whether the town wants truth coolness or simply a charm strong enough to make everyone stop talking. The dog sniffs the shrine again and remains unimpressed by devotional architecture. At the manor hall, people are gathering beneath the eaves, not as many as at market, but enough. The woman in the green cloak stands with her husband and two kinswomen near the wall, where morning light touches her face and shows how little sleep has visited her. The younger man waits apart, guarded by a cousin, and looking thinner than before, as if shame has been eating from his bowl. The priest is there too, his hands folded in his sleeves, his expression grave but not hard. Brother Martin stands near him carrying a small bundle of parchment, and looking as though he would rather be copying a difficult saint than attending an easy sin. Inside the hall is colder than you remember. Fresh rushes have been scattered, and someone has laid juniper among them for its sharp green scent, and some say to cleanse ill air from quarrels. The fire burns low. The steward sits behind the long table fur collar, brushing his neck, the clerk beside him with quill ready. The half-burned candle from the church porch has been brought, or one like it, and set near the table. Its beeswax flame shines small and steady against the morning gloom. The proceedings begin with names again. Names are handles by which the law lifts people into view. The steward speaks of the court's peace, the husband's grievance, the wife's answer, the young man's denial and admission, the neighbour's testimony, the priest's counsel. The words are careful, but beneath them you feel fatigue. Everyone has carried this matter for days now in court, church, market, road hall, shrine and storehouse. The town is hungry for sentence, yet also tired of its own hunger. The husband speaks first. His anger has not vanished, but it has changed shape. It is less like a blade now and more like a stone he has held too long. He says his name has been mocked. He says his household has been made uncertain. He says he cannot bear laughter at the mill. Then, after a silence, he says he does not wish his wife cast out in winter. That sentence moves through the hall more deeply than accusation did. A kinsman frowns, perhaps wanting a harder line. One of the wife's women begins to cry without sound. The woman in the green cloak is asked whether she will accept penance and swear amendment before priest and neighbours. She lowers her head. Her voice is quiet, but this time it does not vanish. She says she will. No one can quite agree afterward whether this is confession, compromise, exhaustion, or the only road left open. The clerk writes the words, and again you think how parchment keeps bones but not breath. The younger man is fined. The amount is not ruinous, but it will hurt. He must provide sureties, keep away from the household, and stand before the parish on Sunday with a candle bareheaded, while the priest names the sin without feeding the town more detail than it deserves. The steward's face suggests he thinks the town deserves almost no detail at all, which may be his wisest judgment. The woman too must perform penance, but the priest speaks softly with the steward, and the form is made less harsh than some expected a candle at the church door. Prayers, confession alms for the poor, and a period of watchful reconciliation under her husband's roof. A murmur rises, not quite approval. Some want more, some are relieved. Some simply adjust their cloaks because mercy is interesting, but cold feet remain persuasive. The old widow from the alehouse whispers that in her youth they would have made the pair walk farther. The serving woman standing near the doorway with a basket murmurs that youth has a fine memory for punishments it did not suffer. You nearly smile. The priest lifts the candle and speaks of repentance as a road, not a door. It must be walked after everyone stops watching. He reminds the husband that forgiveness, if offered, must not be used as a fresh whip each morning. He reminds the gathered neighbours that shame may correct, but cruelty fattens itself on correction until it becomes sin in its own right. This lands uneasily. Medieval people know cruelty well, but they do not always enjoy hearing it named while they are holding it. The steward gives final words. Fines are noted, sureties named, penance recorded, peace commanded. The clerk's quill scratches, then stops. That silence feels larger than expected. No thunder, no miracle, no sudden washing clean of the town. Only a decision, small flame, cold hall, tired faces, and the smell of juniper crushed under boots. When the people leave, they do so slowly. The husband and wife walk together, still not touching, but no longer separated by as much space. The young man remains behind to arrange payment and sureties. Brother Martin catches your eye once, then looks toward the candle. Mercy, he had said, is hardest to write because it often happens after the record ends. Outside, the morning has softened. Mud returns where frost gives way. The town resumes itself. Bread-sold hens, scalded ale, carried children sent on errands, doors opened and shut. Yet something has bent here, not broken cleanly, not healed fully, only bent under the weight of human weariness. You follow the lane toward the church, the dog at your side, while the bell begins to stir above the roofs, calling everyone forward into the ordinary labour after judgment. The church bell carries you forward before you see the tower, its voice rolling over the roofs in slow bronze waves, softer now than it seemed on the first wet evening, when you came beneath the town gate with mud on your boots and smoke in your cloak. The sentence has been given. The court has spoken. The priest has named penance. The town, having leaned close to the flame of another household sorrow, begins at last to draw back blinking, as if surprised by how cold its own hands have grown. You follow the husband and wife at a distance along the lane toward the churchyard. The woman's green cloak is darker at the hem from old rain and new mud. Her husband walks beside her, not quite touching though. Once, when a cart jolts past and splashes the stones, his hand lifts as if to steady her, then lowers again. It is a small movement, hardly anything, and yet in a town trained to notice hardly anything may become a whole winter's worth of talk. The dog trots between puddles with the satisfied air of one who has concluded that human justice is less reliable than dropped bread. The church porch waits under the yew-tree wet stone shining in the pale afternoon. A few parishioners gather, fewer than the market crowd, but more than mercy requires. The priest stands at the doorway with the beeswax candle, its flame shielded by one hand. Brother Martin remains near the wall, his ink-stained fingers tucked into his sleeve, watching not like a judge, but like a man trying to remember what parchment cannot hold. Some swear that a candle carried in penance burns lower if the heart is false, though no one can quite agree whether wax knows anything about truth or simply fears the wind like the rest of us. The woman stands at the threshold. Bareheaded, she holds the candle while the priest speaks. His words are plain, not cruel. He names sin, repentance, amendment, and peace. He does not feed the crowd every detail it hungers for. That restraint feels like a kindness, though kindness in public often makes people shuffle their feet. The young man stands apart with his own candle pale and still guarded by kin. His fine has been promised, His sureties named his path narrowed away from this household. He looks older than he did by the cartwheel, though only days have passed. You watch the candlelight tremble against the church door's iron straps. This door has seen brides, infants' coffins, beggars, proud men, frightened women, oaths, bargains and lies told so smoothly they may have fooled even those who spoke them. Today it holds shame without devouring it. That is something. Not enough, perhaps, but something. When the prayer ends, the priest sprinkles holy water and the droplets shine briefly on woolstone and skin. The crowd waits for more because crowds are rarely satisfied by endings that do not crack like thunder. But nothing more comes. No one is dragged away. No miracle descends. No painted saint clears his throat and settles the matter for all time. The woman lowers the candle. Her husband takes it from her only when the priest nods, and together they carry it inside to leave near the altar. The town begins to loosen. A widow mutters that penance is softer than it used to be. The serving woman from the alehouse answers that winters are hard enough without people making them harder for sport. The toll collector coughs into his glove and pretends he's heard nothing. A child asks whether the candle is magic, and his mother tells him candles are for prayer, not magic, then quietly touches the blue thread tied at her own wrist. Medieval certainty is often like that, stern in public, knotted in private. You remain beneath the yew until the couple comes out again. This time the husband and wife walk closer. Still not hand in hand, not healed, not simple, but closer. Their kinswomen follow, and one carries a small loaf wrapped in cloth. Ordinary life is already waiting for them, a hearth to stir stores, to count linen, to mend neighbours, to endure silence, to cross words, to learn again one by one. Punishment has brought them to the door. It cannot carry them through the years beyond it. You turn from the churchyard and walk toward the town gate. The route takes you past the market square, now thinning into evening. Fish barrels are closed. Wool is packed away. The baker brushes crumbs from a board. The iron collar and the stock stand unused in the damp patient as old warnings. Near the town cross, a peddler gathers his charms, red thread, pewter badges, bits of parchment into a leather pouch. He gives you a solemn nod, as if he has spent the day defending civilization from jealousy by retail methods. At the alehouse, smoke leaks from the rafters, and for a moment you smell again the first night's pottage, sour ale, old rushes and damp wool. The half-burned memory of that beeswax candle returns to you small and golden in a room full of hungry talk. You remember the manor bench, the abbey ink, the noble hall, the rough music beneath the moon, the shrine at cold dawn, the storehouse locks, the cracked cart wheel turning again after repair. Each place has shown you a different face of punishment, and none of them has been simple. At last you reach the gate where your journey began. Evening has settled gently over the wall. The guard barely glances up. The portcullis hangs like black teeth above the arch. Beyond it the road bends into mist past fields, shrines, hedges and sleeping villages, where bells will go on marking hours no matter what hearts have broken or mended beneath them. You step through and the town falls behind you slowly. The dog follows, of course. The road is softer now, damp but quiet, reflecting the last colour of the sky. Behind the wall the bell rings once more, not as judgment, not as warning, but only as time. You understand as the sound fades that medieval society punished adultery because it feared the loosening of bonds, marriage, inheritance, labour, honour, faith, household, peace. Sometimes punishment guarded what was fragile. Sometimes it only gave cruelty a respectable cloak. No one can quite agree where justice ends and appetite for shame begins. Now the road grows dimmer and you let the lesson become lighter in your hands. The fields darken. Smoke rises from far cottages in thin blue lines. A last cart creaks somewhere beyond the hedges, and then even that sound drifts away. You walk more slowly, feeling the earth beneath your boots, the cool air on your face, the wool at your shoulders, the quiet warmth of the dog moving near your side. The medieval world softens around you. The walls become shapes, the church tower becomes a shadow. The market, the court, the candles, the whispers, the stern faces all settle into distance, like embers covered carefully with ash. Nothing needs to be solved now. Nothing needs to be weighed. The night asks only that you breathe and listen, and let the old road carry itself onward without hurry. A small fire waits in imagination low and warm beneath soot-black rafters. Rushes lie still upon the floor. A wooden bowl rests beside a folded blanket. Somewhere beyond fields silvered by frost a bell answers, another bell slower and softer each time. You're safe outside the watching crowd. You're only a traveller passing through the dark, wrapped in quiet, with the long day behind you. So let the town sleep. Let the court roll close. Let the candle burn down in peace beside the altar. Let tired hands unclench beneath wool blankets, and let every hard word spoken in the hall fade into the rafters with the smoke. The road is dark, but it is calm. The night is deep, but it is gentle. And as the last bell dissolves into the fields, you may close your eyes and drift slowly, warmly away.